Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Nordea Open special, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
We take you behind the scenes in Bastad,
Interview Ruud and Rublev.
and sit down with former bar number 2 Tournament Director Magnus Norman.
Chris, today we are doing something a little bit different at Tennis Weekly HQ, and we're going to be talking about your trip to the Nordea Open. And before we get into it, I'm actually a little bit relieved because on the script you have put Nordea Open and not Bastad or Bastad, so I'm not going to get into any sort of pronunciation troubles.
Well, you already have, Joel, with that because it is Bastad. It's not Bastad, it's not Gastad, it's none of those, Joel. I know it's confusing.
It's a total nightmare. It is a total nightmare.
It is.
I mean, what is so Bastad or Bastad, that is the city. What is Nordea? Is that the region? What is that?
The Nordea region of Sweden. I can confirm that's not the case. It's actually a bank. It's a bank in...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
they sponsor the event. And if I had been banking with them, I would have got a free bucket hat. But next year, there's always next year, Joel, when I can get my hands on one of the bright blue bucket hats.
They I would have hoped maybe the blue bucket hat was part of if you won the Nordea Open. That would have been forget fancy trophies and all that stuff. Bucket hat. That's what I want.
I did think that was kind of iconic. They did get a bucket hat when they won, as well as Casper got a picture of a champagne bottle and Andrey got the champagne. So I'm not sure if he's going to hang up the picture, but there's this wonderful clip where he can't even clap because he's holding his bucket hat, his picture, his trophy, his flowers, and his cheque.
I mean, it was such a great spectacle, wasn't it, the final, because it was a 250. We had two top 10 players, and Andrey Rublev did come out the champion over Casper Ruud, 7-6, 6-love. And we have our tour catch-up, which we recorded on Monday to kind of talk about the action and kind of the press room and what that was like. But really, this episode, we're going to be focusing on specifically some really interesting insights from Andrey Rublev, Casper Ruud. We've also got some interview time with Magnus Norman as well. So we're going to be deep diving into all of that. Before we kind of get into those clips, Chris, you obviously were there for the whole week. Just kind of tell us a little bit about the experience of being there in this 250 clay event. What was your experience like across the week?
Well, so I had been previously last year, went to the final, and it's very easy for anyone in Copenhagen. You hop on a train for 2.5 hours and you are there. But I was actually coming from a different part of Sweden. But in terms of the whole nature of the tournament, it's set in this summer town with a very small population of around 5,000 people. And then in the summer, lots of people on their boats come down. There's lots of German people come over as well, and Norwegians. And it becomes this wonderful summer destination. So there are beach bars. It really does have some great vibes there. A little bit of a party atmosphere. Our Airbnb host was a bit nervous we were there to party, but we did assure her we were with the tournament, which I think she only believed when she saw our accreditation.
Well, I have heard also, is there a famous local nightclub?
Yes.
I believe there is a clip on social media circulating of Andrey Rublev celebrating in this nightclub on top of like the beam in the roof. Is that like an institution in the area?
Oh, it is. I think, Joel, if you were there, that would be the place we'd find you.
Is that where I would be?
It's the
Forget the tennis.
vodka revolution of the Bastad Strip. But no, it does have cult status, and that's where everyone heads, and multiple players kind of go there throughout the week. We did see Zverev and Rublev there, so that wasn't his first attempt at going there. But I mean, Pepe's Bodega is the name of the place, and it's quite the cultural institution there. I think everyone has some good and bad memories from spending time there.
Yeah, I definitely would have maybe sneaked off, maybe left you to the tennis. I would have sneaked off maybe to the, maybe I would have sneaked off to the club. But yeah, I mean, it was an eventful week, wasn't it? I mean, apart from having two top tenors in the final, I mean, we had Leo Borg's first win. We had the big breaking news at the start of the week with Ymer's anti-doping news coming out all over social media. It's still coming out, I feel, on Twitter from his personal account. And we also had the reports of Zverev, some further abuse allegations. So yeah, just talk to us in terms of like what was going on in the press room, because I feel like you would have gone in there and just been like, let's focus on the tennis. But actually, when all these kind of news stories were breaking, were the kind of the bigger stories actually off court instead?
Yeah, and I think when you think about what you've just asked, it doesn't feel like a 250 because of just how many people attend it, just how big the stands are, but also just how big some of the stories were that came out of the tournament. It definitely felt like in a week where it was sharing the spotlight with some other 250 tournaments, that this was the 500 of the 250s in many ways because of how much was going on and just how much of the attention was there. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stories. Leo Borg, very big deal in Sweden. And obviously the Swedish number one, Elias Ymer, that's the biggest story probably of the week. And he was a very noticeable absence there for reasons other than the doping situation and the mistesting. So it did feel like this whole week it's kind of been a 250 media room, which had to operate a bit like a very serious sort of operation at times with some pretty heavy questions being asked.
And how did it work in terms of the local language media and like English speaking media? Was that quite a challenge to sort of juggle with?
Well, I did say to Casper, I have to apologise, I don't speak Norwegian or Swedish, and he said it was fine.
Was he surprised?
I think, to be honest, the nature of how it works when you speak, so Swedes will speak Swedish to Norwegians and Norwegians will speak Norwegian back, and they understand, and the same with Danish and Swedish. So I think actually sometimes it's just nice for him to speak English because then nothing gets lost in translation. So a few times he did switch to English to make sure that everyone was very aware of what was being said and not to get anything kind of misconstrued at all. But he was not surprised that I couldn't speak any languages at all as a Brit in Sweden.
Well, I mean, Casper Ruud obviously was probably one of the biggest players there, like home hope. Wanted to see how he got on, and you actually got some time to spend with him, to chat with him about the tournament and about his experience with the tournament as well. And this is what he had to say.
And then final question, you talked about on court the fact that it almost feels like a home tournament here for you, the fact you drove down, you have family here. A few words on the support that you feel playing here.
It's great. For Norwegian, if you're a Norwegian tennis fan, this is the closest that you can kind of come to have a tournament at home soil. We don't have a tournament in Norway. We don't, unfortunately, even have a challenger or a future tournament at this stage. We used to have some future tournaments back in the days, but it is something that I hope can come to Norwegian soil one day, to be able to play an ATP event on Norwegian soil would be amazing, but Bastad will do just fine for now, and a lot of Norwegians have taken the drive down here to come and watch and support, and it's a great opportunity for me to play close to home, and I think also a great opportunity for Norwegian tennis fans to take the trip down, not just to watch me, but to watch other great players as well, and for hopefully young Norwegian tennis kids can be an inspiration and motivation to see other professional players playing close to their home.
Thank you. And that is something that I think probably people wouldn't realise, that there isn't a tournament in Norway and that this is very much Casper's home tournament. He drives down there. We did speak about his little dog causing interruptions to the final, little bias.
That tweet literally broke our social media. I thought, it might be something, like maybe in the Wimbledon finals, Carlos Alcaraz. But no, Casper Ruud's dog is like, he's like a media darling at the moment. Or he's a Tennis Weekly media darling.
Well, he is. And then at Hamburg, they were posing for pictures, him and Andrey outside of the hotel with the dog. So the dog is still very much on the trip. But in terms of the nature of being so close, it means that some of his family were able to come down. There's so much support for him. He kind of is the Prince of Scandinavia in the sense that he's so universally liked across Scandinavia in this sense. So in the final, the support was obviously for him, and that was kind of what people were probably hoping for on the day, would be that it would be a very close final with Casper coming out on top. So I think it is very nice, but it is just, it points to the fact there's still no ATP tournament in Norway or in Denmark, but they both have top 10 players on the ATP side of things. So it is interesting. You do find this quite often, but it does feel a little bit odd that Sweden would have two tournaments, but without any top players.
I mean, just talk to me about that, because obviously Casper Ruud is not from Sweden, but as you say, he always like treats it as his kind of second home. Is it like we're all in this together as one, and is he like almost kind of treated as a local? And what is like the fan kind of reaction to him? Are they all kind of clamoring towards him, asking for autographs when he walks around? What's like his treatment, would you say, in Sweden, being from Norway?
I mean, he's everyone's favourite there, and a lot of Norwegians came down. We met quite a few who said, we just saw he was playing and we drove down. We haven't got a ticket. We just want to see Casper. So he is a big deal, and people are very excited to see him there, but they are very respectful in Sweden. So you might come up and sign something for a small child, but people will normally just say good luck or engage in a very small way rather than kind of clamouring over anyone. It's not really the nature of the tournament or the culture, but it's very nice for him because he does obviously feel very at home, and he was the headline act this week.
Yeah, and he brought some fantastic tennis, I thought, throughout the week. Getting to the final. Yes, you probably would have been a little bit disappointed that he didn't come out as the champion, but it was interesting. I think, like, just kind of watching clips of it, the conditions. It looked quite windy at times, didn't it? And we're going to hear from Rublev and Ruud about the conditions because, they were quite testing at times. And this is what they had to say about it.
In terms of your game today, firstly, well played.
Thank you.
The conditions out there were pretty windy. You did talk about it on court. How well do you feel that your game kind of almost feels like custom built for wind in some ways in terms of the margin? Does it give you an advantage against flatter hitters?
Maybe. I don't know. I think I cope with the wind quite well. I'm used to the wind myself. Where I grew up was close to the sea as well, so wind was there definitely when I grew up. So I think I have my way of dealing with the wind. Obviously, it can be frustrating sometimes, no matter how well or how bad you might feel like you play. But obviously, I think just the level in general will kind of decrease a little bit when the wind is there, but you just have to kind of accept it, and I think that's kind of what I try to do as good as possible, to accept that you won't be able to feel the ball completely perfect in the strings for every shot, and sometimes you might miss time a shot, and that's why it's good for me to play with a lot of topspin, so I have a feeling that the ball will kind of dip inside no matter what balance I am in when I hit my shots.
In terms of some of the stats you had today, and yesterday, you're playing really well off the second serve, with 73% of points won yesterday with your second serve and 60% today. Is that something you've been particularly working on?
My shoulder has been it's been bugging me a bit after Roland Garros, and I haven't actually practiced too much serving the last weeks because it's been hurting every time. But just now, the days leading up to Bastad is when I started again, and it's been working surprisingly well. And I think it's just a nice feeling to be able to hit second serve at full speed, the kick serves that I like to hit. At Wimbledon, I was trying to kind of save the shoulder by hitting a little bit more slice on the second serve, which is not something I typically do, but it was because I was still kind of feeling some issues with the shoulder, but now I feel fine again, and I think the second serve is kind of biting pretty hard off the clay here, and I think it somehow kind of causes some issues maybe for my opponents, and I'm able to set up the points well after a heavy kick serve on the clay.
Final question. So you're the number one seed this week, obviously. How does that affect how you play a tournament in terms of, is there added pressure, or do you think it's more of a privilege because your rankings got you to this position?
I think previously I felt a little sort of pressure every now and then, but this week not really. I know that there's a lot of other great players here, and just going to try to kind of survive day by day and get along with the tournament. That's the goal, and then see what happens now when we're going into the weekend, and quarterfinals tomorrow. I'm gonna try to play my best possible, and I think I just realized that I will lose with the ranking that I have now. Most of the matches that I lose will be against players who are lower ranked anyways, so it doesn't really matter if you're first seeded or third or fourth or fifth or whatever, but and it's not what should I say, it's no problem losing to lower ranked players at all. There are so many great players these days, so I think I haven't really felt pressure yet, but maybe it sneaks up on me in the weekend.
I'll ask again later.
Yeah, let's see.
Thank you. And so what I think is quite interesting there is that the nature of how it plays is that it can be very windy. It can also be very heavy, dependent on the day, and it can change very much within the day. So I think it is something where Casper, who has a bit more margin, it really does help him. But I also think something that was very interesting when we talked to him in that clip was that playing as the number one seed probably isn't, and being the headline act that we talked about in a place where there's so much support for you, it probably is quite a lot of pressure, but it seems like he's really settled into it very nicely and has kind of come to terms with the fact that if you are ranked number 4, unless you're losing to the top 3 players every week, you will be losing to people ranked lower than you, and there's no shame in that. So I just think there's something about him that seems very balanced, and that's something that I think has been really nice to see, is that he's someone who just clearly enjoys playing tennis, and win or lose, it's not going to affect how his day goes. He's still going to have a great time with his little dog heading off to the next tournament.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties, I think, of Ruud's game, is that he does play with a lot more margin, I think, than other players. And when it comes to events where conditions can be a factor, and like as you said, kind of the wind this week, I think it really helps him. And if his opponents aren't able to adjust to that, I think his adaptability to the elements, I think, really helps him. So yeah, it's interesting, I guess, to hear about that. And as you said, like, it's quite interesting to hear, I think, in terms of he's almost like comfortable with losing to lower ranked players than him. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but is there a feeling like, do you want to see like more competition and be like, no, I should be living up to my ranking and absolutely like not be losing to anyone below?
Is he too nice? Right. I think that's the thing. And he's an absolutely lovely chap. He's wonderful in interviews and he makes time for everyone. But I think, to be honest, it actually helps you have a much more relaxed approach when it comes to your game, allowing him to peak at semi-finals, because you're not so hung up on the loss you just had in the way that Rublev can be so hung up on the point he just lost. And I actually think it means that he's probably got a lot more longevity, and that's why he's had some of those higher peaks maybe than Rublev has. And something that did test Rublev during this week is the conditions that we mentioned. We asked him about it, and we also asked him about how his serve was going, and we also asked how he felt about being mistaken for Zverev. Your experience here, it seems like you're getting used to the conditions, you're enjoying it more kind of match by match. Do you feel like you are adjusting?
I hope at least today for sure, because I was playing much better, I was more aggressive, and I was making much more winners than yesterday, because yesterday I felt a bit lost on court after the grass. I was rushing sometimes too much, I couldn't find the rhythm, and today was completely opposite story. So yeah, and in the end I was enjoying much more, because I feel that, I don't know, everything going well.
And in terms of the match, you saved both break points that you faced, and you served 6 aces, which was more than Sasha in the match. How important do you think that your serve was in terms of getting this done in 2?
I mean, the serve is always important. It doesn't matter who you play, where you play, because I mean, the same Sasha, he served 220 something, and me, I served 200 something as well. So if you make those serves a lot close to the line, it's so tough to do something with them. So it doesn't matter where you play or who you play. Of course, you still can win matches because you're good from baseline, but if you serve 200 something close to the line, and you win much more easy points, basically, because of this, and you save energy.
Yeah, and final question, not exactly about the tennis, but we uploaded a picture to our socials this week, and people thought that Zverev was actually you because of your haircuts were quite similar.
I know.
Is that something you've noticed? And
I don't know,
are you okay with it?
I don't know how they call me already, everyone. They call me Zverev, Sinner, Shapovalov, Tsitsipas, almost everyone. I don't know, I'm still waiting for the day that, because I don't know, at least, okay, when I'm 50 in the world and they're calling me Zverev, okay, because he's much more famous, or Tsitsipas, but now I'm at least top 10 as well, and they're still calling me. Nothing changed.
Is such an interesting character, isn't he? He's so... There's something like mythical, I feel, about him that is so alluring to fans, and that I feel like that conversation was no different. And I loved that banter that he had around sort of being mistaken with, well, Zverev, Sinner, Tsitsipas. He did say Denis Shapovalov, and I'm not gonna lie, I was like, I could see it with the other three, with the long locks, etc. particularly with Zverev and Tsitsipas. But Shapovalov, really?
I mean, I don't see that, but I guess he did have long hair at one point, didn't he? So maybe that was when he was coming up, but I guess he can't catch a break. He's a top 10 player, he just wants to be recognised for being a top 10 player. But no, he really does have those lovely moments in interviews where he loves to crack a joke, and especially when it came to this, he took it all in good spirits, as opposed to kind of being a bit annoyed that we asked a question that wasn't exactly about the tennis.
And I mean, just back on the talk on the conditions and playing with the wind and being able to play with margin, I would argue to say that Casper Ruud, yes, I think he can take that in his stride very well. Is it fair to say, from an Andrey Rublev perspective, it takes a little bit more time, or his game is not maybe as suited to adjusting with conditions?
Yeah, I think that's something that does feel like it's true. And I think the case in the final, when we spoke to both of them, was that it was just a case the conditions really played to Rublev's favour. It wasn't as windy, and he played lights out tennis. And so I think Casper can play he played a fantastic first set in the final, but I do think that when Rublev is on, I mean, he gets some fantastic results. And when he isn't, like we've just seen actually in Hamburg, he can find a way to win, but it isn't always pretty. But on finals day, I mean, it was impeccable. And we spoke to Casper about just how well he felt Rublev played, and if that was the best he'd seen Rublev play. And we'll hear from him now. Casper, unlucky today, but was that the best that Andrey's played against you? And if he plays like that, do you think he's capable of making a slam final or even winning a slam?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he plays really aggressive, no doubt about it. And we were quite joking a bit about back and forth on the court about certain things, but he said to me, it's just a matter of time before I hope you win or see you win your first Grand Slam, and I didn't have the chance to tell him back, but I'm sure that he will do better in quarterfinals in his career. I mean, he's just been a bit unfortunate in many quarterfinals. He lost many tough matches, and many times he played Novak also, who's always going to be probably the toughest player to play in the quarters of a Grand Slam. So he's been a bit unfortunate, but he's a really good player. I think when he plays on top, not many people can handle his pressure and his aggressive style, and he's one of the guys who plays fastest on tour in terms of how hard he hits the ball. So he also moves well, and today he was also did some good finesse shots with the slice and certain things. So he had kind of all answers to my game today.
Casper's had the finals, Rublev's had the quarterfinals. Is it down to a bad draw? Or is it down to the fact that there's this mentality that Casper kind of has in the big match player that he kind of has become three of the last 6 Grand Slam finals? Where do you stand on that, Joel?
Yeah, it's tricky. I feel like, I'd still say with Ruud, he has a little bit of inconsistency at that Grand Slam level. It seems to be either I do really well or maybe I go out earlier in the week. And from an Andrey Rublev point of view, I just think he is a lot more consistent when it comes to Grand Slams, but also on the tour events. But he maybe hasn't necessarily had the breakthrough moment, I think, that that Casper Ruud has, and maybe we've seen a higher level from Casper Ruud as a result. He's reached Grand Slam finals. Andrey Rublev has not at the moment been able to do that, or even to crack a Grand Slam semi-final. So yeah, I think it's
a bit of a Davydenko, isn't he, Rublev?
Yeah, it's interesting, but it's frustrating because you see like this tennis from Rublev, particularly in the final, in the second set when he's bageling Casper Ruud, kind of 6-love. I feel like it's there, but it might, to me, it's maybe more of the kind of the mental thing and the mental approach. And with Ruud, it's like I think he has a very relaxed persona, and you could argue to say maybe he doesn't need a competitive edge because this is what he's most comfortable with that sort of more relaxed position. Whereas I know some fans have spoken to me about Andrey Rublev and this feeling that does he want it too much, and as a result does that affect his game, particularly when it comes to Grand Slams with those big matchups?
That's a really good point, and it does take him kind of a while after he's had a peak to kind of re-peak again. It's not always his level, and that was something that we actually asked him after the final in terms of where his level stood. Was this the best he'd played this year? Because in that set against Casper, that second set, bageling the world number 4, that really does feel like it would be. And he also mentioned some of the conditions that he likes the heavy conditions that kind of played to his favour. And then he also mentioned a little bit of Rublo in terms of when that brand will launch. So we will get an exclusive there now. It wasn't our question, but the fans would love to know, Joel, so we'll hear from him now. Congrats on the win. You won the tournament, you conquered the weather conditions here. It did start quite windy early in the week, and it seems like now you've got used to the conditions and that you might kind of really like playing in some of the conditions here.
I like to play in those conditions that we play the final, when it's let's say cold, and it's like a cold and wet weather, that the clay is heavy, because then it's tougher to accelerate and the ball is not jumping that high, and then I feel like everything is slower and I have much more time for everything, to return, to attack, and I like those conditions. And it was the same, a bit similar conditions when I was playing semi-final in Monte Carlo against Fritz. Was also kind of, they delayed us because of the rain, and was all day was kind of rainy, and the clay was super heavy. The balls after one game was super big, and was a lot of rallies, and I think those conditions are suits me well.
You played a brilliant match, and your backhand down the line especially was on fire. In terms of your performance, was that the best you felt on court this year?
I would say the last couple of weeks I'm feeling the best for the moment so far, since maybe, I don't know, Wimbledon.
Nice.
Please.
You have played for the kids written here. Can you tell us what that means to you?
I mean, to don't make it long answer, I would answer only about what it means with the t-shirt. Basically, it's a collection that I hope finally will release now in upcoming weeks, because everything is a bit complicated to do the final details with the online magazine, and finally, hopefully in a couple of weeks I will be able to launch it officially, and then I will say basically everything, what is the purpose of that, and we'll see. And if we talk in general, it's just, I don't know, to have something that I don't know, the kids, in my opinion, is very important, and to educate them in the right way, to because in the end this is our future, and how we will educate it, that is going to be the future, and for me, I don't know, I feel it's important to help the kids, especially the ones who is maybe doesn't have chance to have a good life, or in general to help the kids, to help them to be a better as a person, more humble, to help other people, and if they need some surgeries and all this stuff, it's something that's important to me, and that's why.
Fans wanted to know, and I wanted to know as well, because we see a lot of tennis players, I think, or more nowadays, just kind of do their own thing when it comes to tennis branding and tennis clothing. You know, we had the RF line, Andy Murray has AMC. So it's interesting to see Rublev also going down this path. But Chris, we knew about this in January. There was an announcement.
In January, and it still hasn't dropped. So we got a lot of people asking us when we spoke to him, did anyone ask? And he said it's weeks, not months. So we can give that news to people. It's weeks, not months. And Rublev is playing very well. So maybe all of it will come together, and he will explain everything to us in terms of, it's a clothing brand that's not about clothes, and it will feature, all we know so far is it'll feature kind of his mantra of play for the kids, play for the light. And so hopefully we'll be able to give a bit more information in the coming weeks on that. But overall, I would say, I mean, it was a fantastic week for tennis, and the tennis that was on display, 5 top 20 players, and Rublev beating, I think, three of them in a row, Zverev, Cerundolo, and then Ruud. So where do you think this puts him going into the US Open swing, Joel? Is he a contender?
It is tough to know, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. I see some of these events like, you know, they can build confidence and I think help build momentum. And I think for Rublev, you know, this is carrying on that momentum from what I would say was a pretty decent, you know, Wimbledon showing from him. Having said that, clay conditions to hard court conditions, you know, there's obviously some transition and adaptation. They're going from Europe, you know, to North America. So I almost want to kind of wait and see in terms of how he's going to perform I think time will tell for Andrey Rublev as we head into the North American swing. But we're going to be taking a quick break now. But join us in the second half where we have an exclusive interview with former world number 2 and French Open finalist Magnus Norman. Casper Ruud speaks out on the Ymer suspension. And we also have a mini par for the courts. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com. And now we're going to move on to a very impromptu, Chris. We don't normally do this, but you have a cheeky little par for the courts for me.
Well, during the rain delay, I saw some of the champions up on the wall and I thought, I need to speak to Joel about this. I've got to put him to the test.
I already know what the question is and I'm already sort of quaking in my...
Well, because this is for you, Joel, I have adapted it, so it is multiple choice. So this is a very unique
a rudimentary. I don't know whether to be offended or happy about that. A rudimentary,
because hopefully it will paint you in a positive light. I would take this as a positive, Joel.
Okay,
but in terms of what I'm asking, the par is set at 1, and I'm asking you 2 questions. You've got to get one of them right.
Par is set at 1.
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
Okay. Pressure is on.
It is obviously Swedish Open themed. And the questions relate to former champions. All you have to do, Joel, very simply, is tell me which one of these players is not a former Nordea Open champion.
Okay.
We have a question relating to the men's side of things and the women's. The first one, if you're ready, Joel.
Yep, I'm ready.
First one relates to the male champions. So which of these 4 players has never won the Nordea Open? Is it Benoit Paire, Jonas Bjorkman, Fabio Fognini, or Rafael Nadal?
Ooh. There's some clay court specialists in there, and I think Rafa would have probably won it when he was like 18 or something. Yeah, Fabio Fognini as well. He loves a 250 clay, so I think he's probably won it. I think I'm gonna say it's a toss up between the first 2, but I'm gonna say Benoit Paire.
I have to tell you that Benoit Paire has won it.
Oh, has he? Oh,
he has indeed. I could not believe this because it's been so long since I can remember him winning a title, but he did indeed beat Tommy Robredo in the final in 2015.
Wow, blast from the past.
A blast from the past, and now the pressure's on, Joel. You're a 0 from 1. Par was set at 1. Which of these players has never won the Nordea Open out of Serena Williams, Sue Barker, Caroline Wozniacki, and Johanna Larsson?
Oh, wow. Johanna Larsson. I don't even know who that is. Serena Williams.
I can tell you Serena Williams won the title in 2013.
Oh, no.
And Sue Barker won it in 74 and 75.
Oh, no.
She defended the title.
Oh, no.
And strangely, Caroline Wozniacki was the right answer, who's reached the final in 2009 and 2017, but never picked up the title. So, who knew, Joel? And I have to say, par was set at 1. It was a tricky one. It was a tricky one.
So, hang on. If it wasn't Benoit Paire, who was it? Was it Jonas Bjorkman?
Jonas Bjorkman had never won the Swedish Open, correct?
Oh, wow.
I did forget about the answers for this, but hopefully you played along at home.
I'm sort of hoping our listeners also maybe got the same as me and got 0, but I feel like they probably got 2 from 2.
Probably, but let us know. Let us know. And just a bit of fun, a little puff of the course, and maybe we'll see how Kim did next episode.
I mean, there were big talking points coming out of the Nordea Open, and probably one of them happened at the start of the week, and it was to do with Swedish tennis player Mikael Ymer, who's been suspended for 18 months for whereabouts failures in relation to drug testing. Now, he's come out on social media. I don't think he agrees with one of the failed kind of whereabouts. I think was the third one, the decisive one. And it was quite interesting because I get the impression this was like the talk of the press room. And, it was interesting, obviously, to hear what the players had to say as well. And this is what Casper Ruud had to say on it.
I know him well, and as a personal friend, it's sad news. Professionally, the rules are there, and everyone has to follow the rules. But for people who maybe don't understand exactly what has happened in this case, it's out of competition testing, which means that he's not asked to be tested after a match and he refused. It means that he was not there in the time slot that he's supposed to be at home, probably, because I think that he goes under the whereabouts system, where we have to put in a system 1 hour every day, 3 months in advance, where we are supposed to be. And this is in a way a fair system, but at the same time, as a player, I have this system myself that I need to follow, and it's not easy always, because you somewhat feel like you live like a sort of prisoner in a way, because you know that if you're not there when they show up in that hour of the day, you are in trouble. And what I mean with saying that it feels like a prisoner sometimes is because, let's say you have this time slot from 9 to 10 one evening that you plan to be home or whatever to have dinner, but then a friend calls you and say, hey, you want to go and grab dinner and go to the movies tonight? And you say, yeah, I would love to, but I can't, because in case the doping controllers come, I have to be home. So it's kind of like feels a little tough sometimes to not have the sort of possibility to kind of live somewhat spontaneously every now and then. And I think that's the case here with Michael, that he's messed up a bit with the whereabouts where he's supposed to be. I don't know why he hasn't shown up or why he hasn't been there, but I know from experience myself that sometimes maybe some friends ask you to go to dinner and you say yes, and then you forget, from 9 I was supposed to be home, and then they call you at 9:55 and say you have 5 minutes to get here, otherwise you get a warning. And that can be a bit tough, because you feel like you're kind of living under this someone who's controlling you every single day, which is a little tough, honestly, but it is the rules. And to me, what was surprising was that he was found not guilty in the beginning. He was free from the hearing, and then the ITF chose to appeal. So to me, this kind of is a bit surprising. I would think that the ITF was there to try to help the players, other than trying to appeal to get them more punishment. So to me, this kind of screams or sends a message from the ITF that they, in this case, didn't really help their players, because Michael is a player who played the Grand Slams for many years now, and without the players there's no tournament. So I think that they should kind of send a stronger message that they actually try to help the players, other than what has happened in this case, where they appeal a decision that was made by someone independent from tennis, who made a judgment and call and freed him, and then for some reason they wanted to appeal. Don't ask me why, but yeah, it's unfortunate for Michael, and it's going to be a tough period for him. It's 18 months without tournaments, without income, and probably he's going to want to try to appeal, but in the meantime he won't be able to play a tournament. So it's kind of like you feel like a victim sometimes, and obviously hasn't been caught for illegal substance, but like I said, you have to respect the rules, and when you have 2 warnings and you know that 3 warnings is kind of very, very serious, then I don't know what has happened on the last one, but I've had 2 warnings myself one time, and I know how stressful it is, because you know that at the 3rd time you will have a hearing, and it's going to be very important that you're there, and you feel like you're kind of living under a knife on your throat. So it's a big mistake doing that, getting that 3rd warning. But I know that it's, like I said earlier, that you kind of feel like you're living under like Overwatch every single day of your life, that you're not able to take a spontaneous trip because I have that hour that I have to follow or whatever. And that's a little tough sometimes for players and other athletes who are living under the whereabouts system.
So this was the story, and it really did blow up in the Swedish media, because they did take it out of context. So it was really important for us, even though that was quite a long answer, to play it in full, because they really latched onto the prisoner side of the comments. We're saying that it can feel like a prisoner if you have to be at a certain location, and you have to be at home or at the disclosed location for that time. Clearly from his answer, he does not feel like a prisoner, and he is on board with the rules. Does think it can be tricky at times, which is quite fair. But I guess, where do you stand on this? Because he did mention some things like, oh, if you want to go and see a movie, I'm like, well, bring the movie theatre to you. You're Casper Ruud. Like, you can afford a big screen.
Yeah, I always feel like with these things, it feels very, it can feel very impractical at times. Like, these tennis players have busy lives and they don't want these people just sort of, hounding them. But I totally get that, in for this to be kind of fair and, the integrity, you literally need to, I feel it could be at any moment. You need to have that fear, I feel, in the players or in the athletes, so that, they are like aware and on top at anything and they can't like look to game or cheat the system. So I sort of sympathize from kind of both the player angle, but also I understand in terms of an integrity point of view. I feel like you need to have the fear there in order to make sure it gets done right. Yeah,
and for me, that my only issue with it is that I think he hadn't necessarily thought about the answer before we started to kind of give the answer, because I'm very much from the Andy Murray school of thought when it comes to testing. We need more testing, not less testing. And I think it's a little bit naive to say, obviously, Ymer in this case hasn't failed a test. And that doesn't mean that he hasn't taken something, because one of the big reasons why you miss a test is because you know that it will come up positive. So I'm not saying in any way that he has used this or used an illegal substance, but they are not as innocent as they always seem, that you rung the doorbell and no one was in. And so I think that's something that we have to keep in mind with the context of this, that this is querying the third offence, not the first two. And so when Ymer says, I do not believe I broke those rules and my conscience is clear with God as my witness, I do think that 2 rules were broken, but you're allowed 3. And Casper said he'd been on 2 as well, and he had to be very careful, which was kind of a bit of a surprise to me that he'd been in a situation where he'd missed 2. But I do think we have to have more testing. The integrity of the sport is so important. And if it comes down to, saying you're going to be in a certain location, you miss that film with your mates, I think it's probably worth it when it comes to anti-doping in sports.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was a big breaking story. And it was interesting to hear, I think, Casper Ruud and what he had to say about it. Another person we actually got interview time with was the tournament director, Magnus Norman.
An all-around legend.
An all-round legend. Whoa, yeah. I mean, I'm really interested to hear, how your chat went with Magnus, because you were able to sit down with him. You said to me he was very charming and very handsome.
Very charming, very handsome. I mean, he spent a week schmoozing the business people of Bastad. Like, that's all the deals are made this week, and everywhere I look on social media, he's shaking someone's hand. So we were very lucky to get some time with him, and yeah, he was great to speak to, and it's been a fantastic week to be a tournament director with some of the stories that have come out of this week, and we got the chance to ask him about them, so we can have a little listen to that now. It seems like it's going really well this year as well. So you must be very busy, but you also must be really enjoying this week.
For sure, it's been above expectations in terms of the quality on the court and the weather and the crowds, sellout crowds this weekend. So it's amazing to see this from starting to talk about the tournament and which players should be asked to come to Bastad and then to see this over the final weekend. It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's 1 versus 2 in the final.
Yes.
Which you've been reliably informed hasn't happened since Söderling was in the final.
Okay.
Many years ago.
2011.
I believe so. Yeah. That's obviously a tournament director's dream.
Yes.
In terms of it being such a high-profile final for a 250.
Yes.
That's got to be something that must be really great for you.
No, for sure. Also the semis. I think this today was if you look at the other tournaments this week, it's probably the toughest draw, and a fantastic Saturday, and also dream final for sure tomorrow. So it's going to be well attended and well watched throughout the world of tennis. So it's going to be, it's a dream for a tournament director for sure.
You mentioned the weather. The weather forecast wasn't great for this week, but have you learned from years of being tournament director that ignore the weather forecast in Bastad?
Yes, because we are right on the sea, and we have a mountain in the back, so it's very easy that things change. It can be rain actually 10 minutes from here.
Yeah.
Above the hill, and here it will not rain. So, but then if it starts to rain, it can also stay here a little bit. So it's a bit tricky, but we've been lucky this week. But let's see, tomorrow the forecast doesn't look too good, but we have let's see what's going to happen.
Fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, so it was great seeing Leo Ball play here this week, getting his first ATP win. Another fantastic thing to happen in the Swedish tournament.
Yes.
And then to play the sunset match. A few words on kind of his progress and the fact that he was awarded a wild card and then obviously got the first win here.
It was a great story. It was great to that we went through with the sunset tennis again, playing an evening match, and then just to hear Advantage Borg again on the center court. That was amazing.
Deja vu.
I got goosebumps on my arm when I heard those words, and it was nice to see Leo perform. He went out there and he really wanted to win the match, and I'm quite. I have seen him play in the past, but I haven't seen him play like full matches like I did this week. So I'm quite impressed by his game, I have to say.
Yeah, same. And in terms of the fact that you've also obviously won this tournament multiple times, you've also been a coach, now you're a tournament director.
Yeah.
Which one of those roles do you think that you enjoy the most? Which one's easier? Or none of them? Sorry, the least.
None of them is easy, but I would say I probably enjoy being a coach the most, because that's where I really help the player. You have someone else who gives you all his dreams and hopes and puts you, right in your knees, and then you work on something, and then you see him win the tournament or whatever, make progress. I think that's the nicest feeling.
And kind of the most rewarding in some ways.
Most rewarding in some ways, exactly.
That makes perfect sense. In terms of the rewarding things about being a tournament director, I was going to ask you in terms of what's kind of the best thing, the worst thing, and are you able to cheer? Are you able to cheer, or do you have to be very reserved?
I don't really cheer for any players. I mean,
a great point.
A great point. Good tennis, and sort of number one and number two in the final. Of course, is a dream final. But then I really enjoy when I see the joy in people's faces, and the joy in our sponsors' faces when they do things and they really like the event, and the players that we have, and you see the sellout crowd, and all the smiles on everyone's faces. That's most rewarding, I have to say.
Absolutely. And then in terms of this being kind of very rewarding for the players, kind of a similar topic, this always does so well in terms of where players love playing, attracts great players, and players always vote it as kind of one of their favourite 250s to play. What is it, do you think, about the tournament that lends itself to that, and how you're able to bring about such a positive experience for players?
Yes, I think it would be easy to say that it's only the facilities. Of course, the facility helps, because you have the hotel right in the middle of the tennis, and you don't have, and you have the restaurants there, and you have everything within 200 meters. But I think it's more the friendly environment. Like Christer has made such a good job over the years to make it a very unique feeling. It's a very familiar sort of feeling. The girls at Player Services, they know how to. They make events every night, different. Like we have the pizza night, we have the players night. You have the game night, and there's always something happening for the players. So I think it's more than just the facilities and the games. It's of course it's big crowds. It's nice to play, very knowledgeable crowd. But I think it's more this feeling of belonging to the Bastad family.
Yeah, and it feels like it's almost like a village life for a week, where everything is so close and you don't have to get that long car drive.
No,
doesn't exist here in the same way. And
you see the other night I saw Sverre walking from the practice courts, and no one really, everybody recognizes him, but no one really bothers him. It's like,
we heard stories about that when Serena was here, that she just went to the supermarket by herself. It must have been so
really
nice.
And she had a security guard, and she said, no, I want to go alone. And the security guard was a little bit like, so he kept following her a little bit, but she was there alone in the supermarket, and
undercover.
Yeah.
And then final question, so what's your best memory from Bastad in terms of as a player? It could be this year, it could be anything. A best memory.
I think winning my first ATP Tour event, 1997, at 21 years old. I think that was a dream come true for all players, winning a professional tournament and doing that at home. I had so many memories. I came to Bastad first time when I was 9 years old, and I came every summer until I won when I was 21. So it was kind of special.
That's amazing. Now come full circle.
Yeah.
Now here we are.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thanks so much for the tournament.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I think what's so fascinating from his background and his perspective is the fact that he has been a player. He's been a coach as well. He coached Stan Wawrinka, and now he's a tournament director. So it's really interesting to see his sort of view of like those roles in tennis and what they are, how they compare with each other. And it was interesting to him, I feel like, to hear about him. I think he almost like, would you say like he saw the benefits most with being a coach?
Yeah, he did. And I think that was quite surprising because, I mean, I'm talking to the tournament director. And so I thought maybe he'd say, oh, being a tournament director is the best possible
the best
thing
job ever.
Yeah, exactly. And really, he said it's so much more rewarding seeing the benefit to a player you can have on a one-to-one basis. He's very involved in coaching as well with the academy and things that he's set up. So I think that's something that's really nice about his answer, that it's not about personal glory. And that's very much in keeping with why he's such an all-round great person to speak to. And he did invite us back, Joel. He said we have to come back, and if Magnus asks me to come back, I'm booking that ticket now.
He wants to shake your hand. He wants to shake your hand again.
Exactly. I'm afraid, though, that there's no sort of big money deal that comes with shaking the Tennis Weekly podcast hand, just the appearance on Tennis Weekly HQ.
I do enjoy that. I was, you spoke about the fact that he still keeps up his kind of coaching gig, and I do like how, players who maybe they enter like a business role or a role off the court, I still like the fact that they kind of stay engaged with the world of tennis, like on the court as well. I think that's kind of like really, really nice, because I think that, that builds the empathy, and I think that builds the kind of the relationships and the authenticness, I think, between a tournament director and trying to get like big name players to come your event. And again, it was interesting, I think, to hear around the fact that this was a 250 event and we got 2 top 10 players in the final. I'd love to know, I haven't really researched it, but like that does not happen, I feel, very often on the ATP tour.
It doesn't come cheap either. So there was some talk after the final as well, in terms of when they said, oh, Rublev, would you like to come back? And he said, well, you have to speak to the guys in the suits next to me. So I think it is a case where they obviously are very good at attracting people from a player perspective, as he kind of spoke about, saying how much they love playing here, but they also make it worthwhile for the players. And it was certainly worthwhile for Tennis Weekly to be there. And so we have to thank Magnus Norman for the wonderful tournament and for speaking with us, but also special thanks go to Christian, who was the leader of the press office, who did a wonderful job, Martin from the ATP, Alice, who's the press assistant, but also a long-time listener, and then Christina, Pierluigi, and Veronica, who were all press assistants. Thank you so much for giving us such a wonderful time, looking after us, and inviting us back next year. So I'm pretty sure I'll be there, but maybe we'll see if Joel makes the trip to the place he can't say the name of.
Yeah, I feel like I need to go and ask the locals to get like the proof. And actually, I just want to get to Pepe's. Pepe sounds like a
Pepe's
great...
Bodega sounds like Joel's vibe.
It sounds like the place
there
to go. I mean, I feel like I'm just sold on that. So yeah, maybe in the future we will go there. But yeah, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action still to come from the ATP and WTA Tour. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. The handle for all of those is @TennisWeeklyPod. And we'll be posting videos from some of these interviews, so do make sure that you follow us.
Really excited for those.
Yeah, there's some fun reactions, especially some of the Rublev reactions, so well worth a look at. And then you can also email us at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our next tour catch-up, so I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.